Welcome to the mother of all talk shows, the Global University of the Airwaves, the College of Knowledge. And a big and particular welcome to our audience on KPFK 90.7 FM across Los Angeles and Southern California. Boy, how I like saying that. They're joining us this week for the first time, and we hope it will be a regular feature, and indeed that the show will be rolled out even farther than Los Angeles and Southern California, right across the Pacifica network. We are asking in our poll, let me mention that up front because it's spectacular news, who is the greatest danger to world peace? Is it Biden, Netanyahu, or Putin? Well, it depends where you look. If you're looking on Telegram, t.me/George Galloway, Netanyahu wins it by a country mile, 86%, with only 6% for Biden and only 8% for Putin. If, on the other hand, you're you're voting on X, it's 13% for Biden, 44% for Netanyahu, and a whopping 43% for Putin. They're not very bright, these NAFO trolls. They thought the poll was only on Twitter, and not for the first time. If you're voting on the YouTube community poll, on the other hand, it was 40% for Biden, 55% for Netanyahu, and only 5% for President Putin on the YouTube stream. And if you're watching on the YouTube stream, then it was Biden 47%, Netanyahu 52%, and Putin only 1%. If you're watching on the YouTube stream, or on Facebook, or on Twitter, or any of the platforms that allow you to do so, please share the show with all of your friends and contacts. The only red lines, it turns out, around Rafah, you know, the red lines that were drawn by President Biden, that were drawn by the European Union, that were drawn by the British government, by the United States' Western allies, by the Arab countries, by Egypt, whose national sovereignty, of course, was umbilically connected to the issue of Rafah, because Rafah ends where Egypt begins. And the Philadelphia corridor, which separates Gaza from Egypt, is protected by the Camp David Accords, and indeed, therefore, is an international law all of its own that has been broken by the Israeli seizure of the Rafah gate. The better to open it and drive machine gun, herd, maybe even cattle truck the Palestinian refugees into the Sinai desert. It would be biblical, except it is hell on earth in Rafah. 1.6 million people, 600,000 of them child hostages. That's what they are. Next time you hear anyone talking to you about hostages, tell them there's 600,000 child hostages in Rafah. How are they hostages? Because they are enclosed from all sides, including the sea. Even if they wanted to walk into the sea and drown themselves, they'd be blown up first by the Israeli naval guns just offshore. 600,000 children, hostages, being massacred right now, this minute. Not last hour, this minute they are being massacred. And of course, the journalists have been occupationally cleansed from the scene. And so only the shakiest handheld cameras are now bringing us children with their entrails spilling out of their gashed, open stomachs. Children without heads, children without legs. The legs themselves, the heads themselves. Yes, we're still all seeing it, or at least those who have a heart, those who have a mind, as to what all this presages for the future of humanity. We are all still seeing it. But the sheep were all partying at Eurovision. And what a sight it was. What a spectacle of Western decadence it was. I'm glad I wasn't watching it with my small children. I'm glad I wasn't watching it with my 89-year-old mother. How would I have been able to explain why at 6 o'clock on a Saturday evening, men with beards and thongs and basques and hold-up stockings and thigh-high boots were swinging their dicks around on television, and that we were all supposed to be watching it? It was the spectacle of Western culture. That's what it was. That's how it was billed. That's how it's portrayed in the Western media. They have no idea, it appears, just exactly what it says about the West, that is our cultural landmark annually. And it's becoming even worse, because not only last year when they rigged it for Ukraine, they tried so hard to rig it for Israel this time. I didn't see the song, I didn't see the program. I knew what it would be like, and I followed it on social media. And I knew that there was a mass voting effort going on, rather like the one that's just happened on my X feed, where 34,348 people voted, and 43% of them voted to say that Putin was the biggest danger to world peace. I knew there was multiple voting going on at Eurovision, but I had no idea just quite how much. I'm reading boasts from people who say that they used 5 credit cards to vote 50, 100, 150 times for the Israeli entrant, and they still spectacularly failed. Malmö in Sweden, where it took place, 10% of the entire population of the city was outside demonstrating for Gaza, for the Palestinian children being slaughtered, whilst the high-heeled boot brigade were cavorting around on the stage. They came 5th, despite a worldwide clarion call from all these patriots, the British patriots, like Tommy Robinson, were hammering on their keyboards, trying to get their Britain first goose steppers to vote not for Britain first, no, for Israel first. The America firsters, the Trumpers, they were beating the drums, trying to force the Israeli entry over the line. All these patriots, all these nationalists turn out to be not America first, not Britain first, but Israel first, leaving the rest of us gasping the question, why? What first attracted you, Mr. Robinson, Mr. Trump, Mr. Biden? What first attracted you to an apartheid state that has murdered and maimed well over 150,000 people in 7 months, in cold blood? Hostages they were, inmates in a concentration camp with nowhere to run, nowhere to hide, mercilessly massacred, mutilated, maimed, all the hospitals having been destroyed so that they could not be treated as their limbless children were carried into hospitals that no longer have any of the means necessary to treat the murdered, the massacred, the mutilated, the maimed. What first attracted you to Benjamin Netanyahu? All these friends of Israel in the American political system, in the British political system, all throughout the West, only the West. They're the only people supporting Netanyahu and his murder gang. Don't ever be confused that we are the world, even if somebody makes a charity single to that effect. We are 13% of the world, and a very big percentage of us are vehemently opposed to the arming, funding, proselytizing for, and diplomatic covering for the Netanyahu, Ben-Gvir murder gang in the Gaza Strip. So we're not 13%. Maybe we're 7% of the entire world's population, but because of our hegemony in international media, we are led to believe not only that we all stand with Israel, but that the whole world is us, which is very far from the truth. In Kharkov, there are mass surrenders going on this hour of Ukrainian forces laying down their weapons and surrendering to the advancing Russian forces. This is not a Putin talking point. This is a fact. Now, it's possible that this was a rogue regiment, that the hundreds who have surrendered were somehow infiltrated by the advance guard of the Putinist forces. That may be true. We'll see tomorrow and the day after that. But it happened. Mass surrender of hundreds of Ukrainian soldiers around Kharkov, an entirely Russian city, of course, founded by Russians, overwhelmingly lived in by Russians, and of course the very city in which the late and lamented Gonzalo Lira used to report to us, for us, on this very program from. It's about to fall. Now, it's possible that they were left leaderless, that their officers were all busy voting on our poll, at least on X. It's possible that their officers were all busy voting for Israel in the Eurovision Song Contest, reciprocating for the assistance they got from the Israeli bots last year in Liverpool. All of these things are possible. But one thing is certain, that in inverse proportion, the NAFO brigades and their journalistic clatterers in the Murdoch newspapers are substituting for the collapse of the Ukrainian war effort, having drafted young boys and old men, having drafted women, having drafted pregnant women, having received uncountable billions of your dollars, euros, and pounds. The front is collapsing. The war is rapidly coming to an end that they told us was simply inconceivable. Indeed, they've said over and over again that they might well have to go to World War III in order to preclude. Well, they better hurry up. You better get your World War III underway quickly, lads, or there won't be any Ukraine to fight it over, because the entire show is collapsing. Now, I'm one of those who denounced the beginning of the war against the people of Eastern Ukraine 10 years ago. That's right. That's when the war began. At least for those of us with two brain cells to rub together. At least for those of us who actually pay attention before the Sky News cameras turn up. Before Murdoch's media empire can pronounce the names of the places being massacred, I was one of those who denounced the Western, US, EU coup that overthrew the elected president of Ukraine, set fire to the Ukrainian parliament, held at gunpoint the elected Ukrainian members of parliament, ordered them on pain of death to sign the Russian language spoken by fully 1/3 of the whole population of Ukraine, including the later President Zelensky as his mother tongue, his native tongue. We said no good can come of this. And when we saw in the trade union house in Odessa the opponents of this coup d'etat in Kiev being roasted to death, burned to death, in an early scene reminiscent now of what we've been watching in Gaza, we knew that no good could come of this. We knew that 10 years ago, when the massacre of little children and women on their way to school, on their way to the shops, on their way to their work, on their way back home, these massacres that took place over 10 whole years in eastern Ukraine, the Russian-speaking populated areas of eastern Ukraine, no good could come of this. People like me said, if this continues, there's going to be a war. Let's implement the Minsk agreements guaranteed by Germany and France and adopted by the United Nations Security Council, giving it the power of international law. Let's implement the Minsk agreements so that war can be averted and civil slaughter come to an end. We knew that when the Minsk II agreements were, as have now been admitted by Angela Merkel and President Hollande, as he then was, that these accords, the Minsk agreements, were a bloody farce, deliberately signed in order to provide a breathing space for a military option to be put together in Kiev that could finish the job of extirpating the language, the culture, and if necessary, the people of fully 1/3 of the territory of Ukraine. Now the teenage scribblers in the Murdoch press don't want to know anything about this. They don't even understand anything about this. They couldn't pronounce Kupiansk, and they don't know where Kupiansk is. Moreover, they don't even care where Kupiansk is. They don't give a toss about Ukrainians. Even those with the yellow and blue emblems, vanishingly few now, in their bios. They don't know anything about Ukraine, even its recent history, never mind its longer history. For them, Ukraine has been an opportunity to bleed and, if possible, to break the Russian Federation. Well, as someone who has stood with Russia for 50 years of my life, with a bookshelf full of Russian classics, with a playlist full of the majesty of Russian classical music, with a seat in a box in the Bolshoi in Moscow, at any opportunity to purchase a ticket, you will never, ever, ever make me hate Russia and love Germany, any more than you will ever persuade me to hate China and love Japan. Because, you see, for a man my age and class, born in the shadow of the Second World War, I am acutely aware that if it wasn't for Russia, I'd be speaking to you right now in German, and the jackboots would be coming up the stairs to pull me off the air and off to a concentration camp. I promise you, tonight is going to be the mother of all talk shows. Stay tuned.